This is Socotra, a landmass that drifted loose from the rest of the world millions of years back and has stayed that way ever since. Out in the Indian Ocean, cut off from any mainland, over 60,000 people share this space with plant and animal life that exists nowhere else on the planet. Trees that look pulled from another world fan out into odd, umbrella-like canopies across the highlands. Fresh water is almost non-existent, and when monsoon season hits, the island can be sealed off from everywhere else for months on end. And still, the people here have carved out a life stable enough, rooted enough, that Socotra gets called one of the safest, most livable places anywhere in the Arab world. So, what exactly made this island turn out so differently from everywhere else? And how does anyone manage not just to survive, but to build a genuine life on a piece of rock this disconnected from everything? Before we go further, tell us in the comments, what time is it right now where you're watching from, and which country are you tuning in from? Now settle in and let's dig into the story of how 6 million years of isolation shaped one of the strangest and most remarkable places left on the planet. By its official name, this is the Socotra Archipelago, a chain of islands governed by the Republic of Yemen. Pull up a map, though, and something doesn't quite add up. Physically, Socotra lies far nearer to Africa than to the Arabian Peninsula it answers to politically, sitting exactly where the Gulf of Aden empties into the broader Indian Ocean, about 350 kilometers from the Yemeni coast and roughly 250 kilometers from the Horn of Africa. Wedged in that space between two continents, the island went millions of years with almost no exposure to the world beyond it. And that very isolation is why so many now consider it one of the strangest paradises still standing. The archipelago consists of 4 principal islands plus a handful of smaller rocky outcroppings totaling around 3,650 square kilometers of land. And it's home to more than 60,000 people whose families have been rooted here for countless generations. Would you give up the ease of city living for even one chance to wander through somewhere this old? That's the exact question Socotra seems to ask everyone who sets foot on it. Head further into the interior, and the terrain seems to shift shape at every turn. The Haggahur Mountains climb sharply out of the cloud cover, rugged and sudden, while broad limestone plateaus spread out beyond them, sliced through with canyons shaped over millions of years. Beneath the cliff faces, hidden cave systems open into chambers lined with astonishing stalactite formations that most visitors never get to see. Farther northeast, bleached sand dunes slope down toward the deep blue sea, almost as if the desert were reaching out to touch the water. This landscape's history reaches back hundreds of millions of years, to when Socotra was still part of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana. As the tectonic plates gradually split, the Arabian Plate pulled away from Africa, carving out what would eventually become the Gulf of Aden. And somewhere past the 6 million year mark, Socotra ended up permanently isolated, floating free with no land connection to anywhere else. From there, wind wore down the cliffs, rain sliced valleys into the stone, and waves shaped the shoreline into gleaming white beaches. Geologists occasionally refer to it as a miniature continent, not for its scale, but for the sheer range packed into such a compact space. Peaks, plateaus, caverns, canyons, dunes, and pristine coastline, all crammed onto a single island. That same slow grind of erosion and separation ended up producing something even more astonishing than the terrain itself. A world of living things unlike anything found elsewhere. There's a principle that usually holds up in nature. The more cut off a place is, the tougher survival becomes for anything living there. Socotra defies that principle entirely. Isolated from both Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, It's had almost no steady contact with either ecosystem for millions of years. Every seed blown in on the wind, every bird knocked off its route, every small creature that made it across alive had to find a way to cope with punishing heat, poor soil, and near total dryness. Turning back wasn't an option. Creatures either found a way to adjust or they didn't survive. Scientists have documented more than 800 plant species on the island, and about 300 of those, close to 37%, grow nowhere else on Earth. That level of endemism is remarkably rare, and it's precisely what earned the archipelago UNESCO World Heritage status in 2008. The dragon's blood tree is probably the single image most linked to Socotra. Its canopy fans out like an inverted umbrella, thick and flattened on top. That silhouette isn't accidental. It's a survival mechanism, refined by evolution to shade its own root system, hold moisture in the ground beneath it, and give young saplings a real shot at growing under the island's punishing sun. Then there's the desert rose, its trunk swelling into a round, water-holding reservoir that hoards every bit of moisture for the dry months ahead. And the Socotra cucumber tree, the only species in the entire cucumber family anywhere on Earth that actually grows tree form. Its thick, bulging trunk barely resembling the rest of its plant relatives. A clear example of just how drastically evolution can reshape a species when it's isolated with nowhere else to turn. The oddities aren't confined to plants. Scientists have logged roughly 34 reptile species on the island, with 31 found nowhere else. Land snails show an even more extreme pattern, with endemism reaching close to 95%, among the highest concentrations of unique species anywhere on Earth. Even birds, which could theoretically fly to escape isolation, have spent enough time cut off here to evolve their own distinct populations, which is exactly why researchers have taken to calling Socotra the Galapagos of the Indian Ocean, not simply for how many species exist, but because each one is its own quiet, self-contained record of evolution, written over millions of years in a corner of the world the rest of the planet barely reached. For as long as humans have lived here, they've made no attempt to force Socotra into submission. Instead, they learned to interpret it, following seasonal winds, memorizing the pattern of the island's brief rainy periods, adapting to terrain that has never once cooperated easily. Nature sets the schedule here, when water arrives, when the fish appear, and when the parched grasslands can once again feed livestock. The seas surrounding the island teem with life. More than 730 recorded fish species and around 250 coral varieties, alongside hundreds of other marine species scattered through the reefs. Well before dawn, small wooden boats head out from shore, fishermen aboard chasing tuna, mackerel, snapper, octopus, and lobster, the catch that keeps families fed and earning. Farther from the coast, up in the mountains, herds of goats, sheep, and cattle pick their way across rocky terrain, searching out whatever grass made it through the last rainy stretch. With hardly any usable farmland, herding has carried island life for generations, providing meat, milk, and hide, and acting almost like a family's stored wealth rather than just livestock. Rain is rare here and falls unevenly when it does, so islanders wring every drop they can out of the small valleys that hold moisture, cultivating dates, pomegranates, bananas, and melons wherever the ground permits. Water matters enough on Socotra that every well and every thin stream becomes something the entire community relies on and safeguards. And people here don't just extract from the land, they've learned restraint. For generations, resin drawn from frankincense and myrrh trees, along with sap tapped from the dragon's blood tree itself, traveled along old trade routes, valued for perfume, medicine, and trade. Families continue to harvest it by hand today, taking care never to exceed what the island can regrow, because here, overreaching doesn't just harm the surroundings, it cuts short the future for everyone depending on it. For thousands of years, Socotra served as a stopover along ancient sea trade routes connecting the Arabian Peninsula, the Horn of Africa, and South Asia, where sailors would pause to refill their water before continuing across open sea. That steady stream of visitors shaped local communities, yet the island's isolation still let it keep hold of something entirely its own: its language, its customs, its whole outlook on life. Islanders speak Socotri, part of the modern South Arabian language family, and barely spoken anywhere else on the planet. For most of its existence, it had no written form at all. Ancestral stories, folk poetry, sailing know-how, and generations of plant-based medicine were all handed down purely through memory, meaning every elder on the island functions as something like a living record of the community's entire knowledge base. Most residents live in small villages where multiple generations of the same family stay clustered close together, and tribal structures still guide day-to-day life here in ways that have largely vanished elsewhere. Disagreements, water access, help for families going through hard times, much of that still gets resolved through tribal elders, the community trusts. Hospitality is just as central. Welcoming a stranger with tea or a place to rest isn't treated as unusual. It's simply expected. In some communities, close friends still greet each other with a gentle nose touch, a small custom that's faded almost everywhere else. The wider world is filtering in gradually. Fresh roads, growing smartphone use, tourism ushering in shifts that would have seemed impossible a generation back. Even so, people here continue speaking Socotri at home, continue passing stories down out loud, continue clinging to traditions that have belonged to this island longer than almost anyone can track. The day begins early on Socotra, well before the sun gets high. In Hadibo, the island's biggest town, shopkeepers are already raising their shutters, the scent of fresh bread rolling out of small bakeries, vegetable stands stocking up with produce brought in overnight, and worn pickup trucks rolling gently down streets that rarely see much traffic. Step outside Hadibo, and life turns quieter and considerably tougher. In coastal villages, small wooden boats push off at dawn whenever tides cooperate, heading out after that day's catch. Up on sun-scorched hillsides, goat herders shift their animals from one patch to the next, hunting for whatever greens survive the drought. Some families operate tiny shops right out of their homes, selling rice, tea, and cooking oil. Everyone plays their part, but nature's rhythm dictates it all. By mid-morning, the roads leading to school start filling. Children near Hadibo reach a classroom without too much trouble. But in the island's more remote pockets, getting an education demands real effort. Some kids trek for kilometers across rugged terrain just to arrive. The local market, meanwhile, stays the busiest spot on the island. Fresh fish straight from the boats, set out beside wild honey, dates, goat milk, and handcrafted goods. Moving around the island demands patience. Roads near the main towns have gotten paved treatment in recent years, but venture past the edges of those larger settlements, and pavement quickly turns to gravel and rough mountain trail. Four-wheel drive trucks are the go-to vehicle since nothing else can handle the ground, and a number of remote coastal villages still depend almost entirely on boats. As the sun dips, fishing boats return one by one, families sorting through the catch right on the sand while kids race barefoot toward fathers coming home. Inside, men gather around hot tea and dominoes, conversing in Socotri, that unwritten language still carried forward through stories and song. From a distance, plenty of Socotra's villages come across as sparse. Plain houses, uneven roads, an unhurried pace that could easily read as hardship. Take a closer look, though, and it's not so simple. Many families here hold on to sizable stretches of land inherited across generations. And prosperity was never about modern homes or belongings. It's measured through land, through livestock, through how tightly a community's relationships hold together. And out here, That's genuinely what keeps a family secure. Wedged between the ocean and a punishing, isolated interior, the island's cooking was never designed around indulgence. It was designed for survival. The tastes that have carried generations through start with freshly caught fish, shark and mackerel above all, pan-fried in sea salt or simmered slowly with warming spices sourced from the wider Arabian Gulf. Socotra's ties to the outside world show up most obviously in the rice, flour, and cooking oil found on family tables, treated almost like a luxury because they cross hundreds of nautical miles from the mainland during the calmer stretches of the year. Once monsoon season hits and storms pound the coast for months, the island can end up entirely sealed off, and meals return to what's always sustained it: stored dates and bowls of goat milk, plain, salty, and enough to make it through. And to grasp real hospitality here, it comes down to one cup of tea. Shay means far more than a beverage. Black tea boiled over a wood fire, blended with a generous helping of sugar and thick, fresh goat milk. By custom, a stranger stepping through the door gets handed a hot cup with the right hand. No explanation required, that heavy sweetness easing the harshness of a place where survival has never come easy. With turquoise coastlines, dragon's blood forests, and a pace this unhurried, it's easy to imagine Socotra as untouched by anything happening outside its borders. Stay a while longer, though, and a different picture emerges. Certain roads bring you past checkpoints, military vehicles, armed guards on watch. Quiet evidence that Socotra remains part of Yemen, a nation stuck in years of ongoing conflict. Most of daily life on the island stays calm, but the after effects still land here. Supplies sometimes get interrupted, prices go up, tourism dips, and development plans stall for years at a stretch. In recent years, the United Arab Emirates has funneled investment into the island: healthcare, education, transport, while the Southern Transitional Council has taken on a larger part in local security and governance, even though Socotra is still internationally recognized as Yemeni territory. It's a strange, layered political arrangement that few islands anywhere else have to deal with. And isolation on its own brings additional constraints. Healthcare remains fairly limited, with serious cases requiring transfer to the mainland whenever it's possible, while simply getting between communities in the mountains or remote coastal areas is its own daily obstacle. Out at Detwa Lagoon, there's no admissions desk, no resort lining the water. But visitors who make the trip out there often cross paths with a man named Abdullah, known throughout the island as Socotra's caveman. He keeps a house in the nearby town of Kalansia, has a wife and kids, a life much like anyone else's. Yet most of his day still unfolds inside a rocky cave overlooking the lagoon, the exact cave where his mother gave birth to him, the place he was raised. Every morning he wakes as sunlight spills through the cave's mouth, heads out to fish by hand or with nets he's woven himself, and carries the catch home come afternoon. He originally started spending time in the cave mainly to give curious visitors something worth remembering. At some point, though, it quit being performance. He genuinely came to prefer that older way of living, enough that he kept showing up even on days no tourists arrived at all. When travelers do stop by, he invites them in, offers freshly grilled fish, and demonstrates fishing methods handed down through generations of his family, and whatever they choose to leave behind helps support his household a bit further. When heavy winds sweep through Kalansia, that same rocky cave turns out sturdier than plenty of houses in town, solid enough that neighboring families have taken shelter there themselves. Abdullah hasn't turned his back on modern life, and he isn't disconnected from his community either. He's simply chosen to hold on to a slower, older pace, one set by the tide moving in and out of the lagoon, and by the pull of a net rising from the water. For millions of years, Socotra ran entirely on nature's clock, but over just the past few decades, change has begun arriving quicker than the island has ever needed to handle. Dry spells are stretching out, rainfall has become harder to forecast, and severe weather is turning into a regular occurrence rather than a rare event. In 2015, two major cyclones, Chapala and Meg, hit the island within days of one another, an almost unprecedented pairing for this part of the world, and a further major cyclone crossed the archipelago again in 2023. Another clear sign that extreme weather is now something local communities need to prepare for, not simply respond to. Researchers studying the island's iconic dragon's blood trees have found that the older, established trees are holding steady, but very few young saplings manage to survive long enough to take their place. Goats devour most seedlings almost as soon as they emerge, and extended dry periods have slowed regrowth even more. Without intervention, the gaps left as older trees eventually die off could turn out much harder to fill than anyone anticipates. Meanwhile, more visitors than ever are making the journey out here, pulled in by the dragon's blood forests and an ecosystem found nowhere else on the map. Tourism has created genuine opportunities: guest houses, guiding work, handmade goods, new income that's raised living standards for a number of households and given people fresh reasons to stay rather than head for the mainland. But that expansion carries its own cost. New roads, heavier traffic, and a steadily climbing number of visitors are straining an ecosystem that was never designed to handle this much activity. And even minor disruptions, repeated year after year, threaten to reshape habitats that took millions of years to form. For the people who call Socotra home, their bond to the island runs deeper than any single explanation could capture. It was never simply the place they happened to live. It's the land where their parents, grandparents, and generations further back than anyone can trace grew up surrounded by ocean on one side, mountains on the other. Nature isn't a backdrop here. It's stitched directly into everyday existence. Older fishermen still head out after dark with no modern equipment at all, guided purely by starlight and the outline of the coast, knowing almost by instinct which season brings the heaviest flow of resin from the frankincense trees. The younger generation is coming of age in a Socotra that looks almost nothing like the one their grandparents knew. Internet access, smartphones, and tourism have opened the island up to a far bigger world than before. Some choose to build their futures elsewhere, drawn by opportunities the island simply can't provide. But many come back too, after years spent studying or working away, bringing fresh skills home without losing what makes this place Socotra to begin with. Staying doesn't mean refusing change. People here still want better schools, better healthcare, more opportunity. They just want it delivered without wiping out an identity that took millions of years of isolation and thousands of years of human history to shape. Socotra is far from perfect. It's still grappling with isolation, with an unforgiving climate, with change arriving faster than anyone here really wanted. But that delicate, hard-earned equilibrium is precisely what makes it so remarkable. A place where every canyon, every tree, every family story still bears the unmistakable mark of an island that spent 6 million years becoming something the rest of the world had never quite seen. That brings us to the end of our journey through Socotra. Thanks for spending this time with us exploring one of the strangest, most isolated islands left on Earth. Subscribe, and we'll keep exploring extraordinary places together.